your experience been thus far performing folk music around the city? Do you find it's an art form that you're getting a lot of support for? Yeah, support's a good word. Compared to other genres, how do you find?
Well, I think Chicago's big enough where you have multiple genres being supported by multiple different communities, and all of which are really great. And the DIY community that I'm personally a part of has a lot to do with how my folk is informed, rather than like Old Town School. Wilco is based out of here. Bloodshot Records is a huge hub for Americana folk music in general, right now. But in terms of support for folk music, it's just the support for community arts kind of informs most of the support that I've gotten for my form of folk music, if that makes sense. Which was easy to find, and I think that's what's kind of crazy about Chicago, is that it is easy to find the support that you need to grow and find the people that will sit down and listen to you instead of talk over you and do their shit,
Right.
So that's part of the ethos of Chicago, rather than moving to Los Angeles or New York, where it's just cutthroat, and if you can't do something, you're thrown aside instead of being seen and heard for a second and being okay, that's where you're at right now. Let's go to another show and see if you get any better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lily's Bar in Lincoln Park. I don't know if you've ever been there. That had a huge comedy scene. I played a variety hour there. They invited me in to do a weekly show, and I just it's a chance to work on your shit everywhere around the city, and I think that's what's so cool.
And that's the thing between the improv community and musicians, is that we intersect very much. I mean, there's only so many storefronts. I mean, there are tons of storefronts, but there's only so many hours and minutes you can fill at a time with jokes and music and improv. So the improv community is always well, we can't fill an entire hour, so we got some buds who either do music, have comedy.
Dude, this variety show was actually incredible. It's called the New Enlightenment Variety Show, hosted at Lily's by my friend Matt Plowman, who was in the whole improv Second City scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's actually how I got the job at La Colombe. It's my manager showed up because she was taking an improv class, right? But the whole format was improv group, stand-up musician, improv group, stand-up musician. And it was just the consistency of it, and because of the environment of everyone from Second City was doing an improv class in general, so they knew, they were let's go and work our shit out. Let's pan it out. Let's knead it. Let's support everyone else. And it was a huge crowd, and because improv groups are massive, so if you have 5 improv groups, you have a crowd, and it's great. But yeah, dude, that helped me so much, and that was that was a little foot in the door. You know what I mean? So it's that's great, but. I suppose, it's just, it's folk music, but it's also folk punk has been amazingly supportive in the city. Punk music there's a bunch of rap music and hip hop artists.
Yes.
Afro punk. There's just everything that has been collaborative and varietal that has been a tributary to how I can produce my own sort of folk music. If that answers that. Really short question.
It does. Well, I mean, Chicago is a large enough city, as you were saying. I mean, there's gonna be people in the city who are inclined to be interested in your interests as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just enough.
You're bound to hit some folk.
Yeah, you're bound to hit somebody. But how do you what would you say the interest level for folk music is here in Chicago versus some of the other genres? Because I mean, we know. So I mean, Ron is a hip hop rap artist. We've had Wilhelm Duke on before. He's a hip hop rap artist. Another friend of mine. He was the Dork. You know Eric.
Yeah,
the Dork guy. Yeah. So we had him on the podcast a few weeks ago.
Nice.
We were talking about him. But how do you let me ask the question a different way. Do you find that people who come to listen to folk music are do you find that there's more people who are I like folk music, so I'm always going to go to folk music type of performances? Or do you find that you get people who are intrigued to learn about folk music that come in? Or what do you see?
I mean, I feel I've found my support and community by what I said. It's just the DIY community is largely punk-ish music, but like punk as an umbrella term for like indie rock, indie folk, indie punk. Like there's just so much you can umbrella under punk that like some hip hop artists, I'm like, that's just like, that's some punk. Like that's crazy. Yeah. So like within that vein, people are so supportive that they'll like, you know, I like to contribute or like to, you know, build a bill that is not just a singer-songwriter or a folk music thing. So it's just like you understand music in a different way each set. So I'll have like at Cole's, I'm playing with Cordoba, who's like a jazz band for all intents and purposes, and Daymaker, who's like a punk band, and then I'm like a folk band. So it's like I feel like everyone feeds into each other, but I did have to like come here, listen hella intensely, and then produce my music as such to like create an environment of which people that can like access punk music be like, oh, cool. He's screaming on stage. Like, because I scream on stage. But, like, that's my outlet now instead of, like, you know, something that I had to, like, find in myself. But, yeah, I think it's just, like, I don't think that people are coming to these shows solely listen to folk music. That's what's great about Old Town, though, is that there is this folk community that I have been connected to called Old Lazarus Harp, which is traditional folk music. And when you say folk music to them, it's basically an oral historical construct. You're talking about, like, you know, 1800s Illinois, Chicagoland folk, you know, and they're just, like, passed down from generation to generation. And they're traditionalists, and I'm not a traditionalist. But having their support has been incredible because they're also DIY. You know, they're like, let's meet at this pub every other Tuesday and play folk music. And that's where I, like, met all the string players I know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So that's really cool. But, yeah, I mean, there's just so many different flavors and so many different communities, but they all kind of combine into just like this vastness of artists who all, you know, go to each other's shows, play on each other's records. All of that kind of collaboration happens.